What's up guys? Welcome back to the Decent Garage. Behind me I've got my 1985 first gen Dodge Crew Cab with a 12 valve Cummins behind it. I built this truck. It's been a long project, as most of you know, but in this video we're going to get the G56 6-speed manual transmission put in. In the last video I tore out everything that had to do with the automatic transmission that was in this truck. Got the transmission out, the transfer case, all the coolers, got all the underside of the truck cleaned and painted, and we are now ready to put the G56 6-speed manual transmission in it. So the goal for today's video is to get that transmission all put in, everything fitted, get the transfer case connected to it, and have everything ready to go for the drive lines to come back in. So let's get started. Alright, so the placement of the cross member, even though you would think it would be pretty difficult, it's actually really easy, whether you're swapping from an automatic or the Getrag on your first gen. So here's the 3 holes for the cross member. Now all you're going to do is shift the cross member back to where the hole that lined up with this front hole is now going to line up with the back hole, and we're going to drill 2 new holes right here. So just like this and this. So we have the front hole here all lined up, new hole here, new hole here. And then we have to do the same thing on the upper frame rail. So you are going to need an extra long drill bit to get to the upper frame rail unless you have your cab taken off. So let's go ahead and get that done. Alright, so for the upper cross member I got this 12-inch Milwaukee 1/2 inch bit. So we're just going to run it right up through this hole, up to that top one, and we'll just do the last 2 holes. Alright, so we have the 2nd gen adapter plate in here, so that's what you need, a 2nd gen adapter plate with a 2nd gen starter, no starter spacer. So I'm going to put all the adapter plate bolts in. I'm going to use medium strength Loctite on them and torque them down to 50 foot-pounds. Alright guys, we're at the point where we need to figure out where we want the shifter to come up through the floor. Now this can be a very daunting task. I'm sure if any of you are doing a manual swap from an automatic, this can be pretty scary. But there's a way that you can do it that will help you out a lot, and it makes it really easy. So let me show you how to do that. I'm going to do this all without putting the flywheel and clutch on and everything yet, because I'm going to put it in, pull it out a couple times so I make sure I get the shifter tower where I want it. And if the clutch and flywheel is in there, it's just going to create too much mess to actually get it in there and find the right spot. So here's what we're going to do. We've got the shift tower here. It's held on by 4 bolts. I'm actually going to pull these stock bolts out. And what I did is I went to the hardware store and bought 4 more of the same thread pattern. So I'm going to grab my angle grinder. I wish I had a bench grinder, but I don't. And I'm going to cut the heads off and actually make these kind of pointy. And what we'll do is we'll thread these in so there's basically pointy spikes coming up out of each of them. And we'll throw this under the truck, we'll jack it up, and these pointy spikes will put some pressure spots in the floor where the shift tower lines up. So then we can just lower it down, cut the square for that. We'll probably cut it a little big compared to the shift tower, but that'll tell us exactly where we need it. Now, this was not my idea. This is an idea from Charlie at Metal by Charlie. I give him full credit for this idea. It's genius, but we're gonna try it, get this shift tower put exactly where we need it. We're gonna cut a hole in the floor. So let's go. Got it? Again, going straight down from that toward the seat. Alright guys, we're making great progress. We got the holes drilled for the cross member. We got the adapter plate and the starter all mounted up. We just mocked in the G56 and cut the hole for the shifter. That trick was brought to you by Charlie Pitcher at Metal by Charlie. So hopefully that's helpful for some of you trying to do this project. But now we need to get the flywheel and the clutch mounted up so we can get the transmission mounted in there for good. And then we can get the transmission cross member all made up how we want it to be. And it should be pretty smooth sailing, right? So let's keep going. All right, so the clutch I went with, I got this from the Hungry Diesel. I went with the Valair dual disc organic street clutch in the quiet version. So that's a mouthful, but that's what I went with. So let's get it all unboxed. Well, let's get some of it unboxed. Alignment tool and our fork. Some padding, so it came with new hardware, new throwout bearing, and then there she is. So let's go ahead and get this mounted up. Alright, we got the flywheel bolts on. We got them with red Loctite. We're now going to torque them down to 102 foot-pounds. So there we go. Hold it there. Hand me one. Torquer. What are you torquing to? 24 foot-pounds. Alright, so these hex bolts that hold the straps on for the quiet portion of this dual disc clutch, they're torqued down to 24 foot-pounds as well. Alright, so we have all these bolts and the two nuts on the studs put on pretty much just finger tight, because what we're going to do, the torque spec for all of these is 44 foot-pounds, but we're going to have to be a little more careful than that. So what we're going to do is we're going to tighten one stud down. As soon as we see the fingers on the pressure plate start to move, we're going to move to the opposite stud. Again, as soon as we see the fingers start to move, we're going to move in that star pattern so the fingers all contract together and we don't get any uneven pressure from the pressure plate onto the friction discs. Alright, we are about ready to get the transmission stabbed in. So we just need to get the throwout bearing put on the clutch fork. One thing that's important, if you're running a dual disc clutch and there's a warning label on here, you'll have the ball inside the bell housing. It's going to have a washer in there. If you're running a dual disc clutch, you need to pull the ball out and take that washer off, okay? So we'll put that back on. That's a 3/4 inch drive. And then we need to put the throwout bearing on. Another thing, there is a clip that attaches this to the ball that'll be hard to see under the truck, but we actually don't have that, and it's Christmas Day, everything's closed, so we're gonna do a rubber band trick for it, which will work just fine. We just need to hold the clutch fork onto the ball while we put the transmission in. Another thing Valair does with the clutch fork is they put a big paint mark on the side that needs to go on the ball, so you can't confuse it. So just FYI. Alright, so first, here we are in the bell housing of the transmission. We're going to put the ball back in. Now this is an aluminum bell housing, so you can't over torque this. So screw the ball in by hand. And remember, we took that nut out from behind it because we're running a dual disc clutch. Now the torque spec on it is 17 foot-pounds. Okay, there we go. All right, now we have our clutch fork and our throwout bearing. So we're gonna put just a little grease here where the throwout bearing rides, but make sure not to get any on the splines of the input shaft. No grease should get on that. It'll fling out onto the clutch plates and cause many issues. And you don't need a lot of grease. Just a little bit will do. A little dab will do you. All right. So we've got our rubber band. We're going to put it around the ball like that several times. Now you hold that down. If you've got a second set of hands, that's very helpful. And so, oh yeah, don't let it slide. There we go. Okay. Let's do one more. There we go. All right, got a rubber band holding the clutch fork onto the ball. Throwout bearings on. Seems to be sliding nice and smooth on the shaft. Just like that, in and out. So We are ready to stab the transmission up into the clutch. Here we go.
Okay, let's bring it close.
Alright guys, real quick, I want to teach you guys something that we learned the hard way. We had everything back in, we had the clutch in, the pressure plate on, we had the transmission up in here trying to stab it in, and we just could not get it to stab in. And we realized, well, we spent probably an hour or two trying to get it, and we were exhausted. So we went inside, did some research, and with this dual disc clutch, the alignment is super important. So this is the alignment tool right here. And I'll put a clip of how the alignment tool was to take out before we actually went and tore this all apart and got it aligned better, okay? There we go. Come on. There we go. So I had to use all the force I had to get it to come out, so the alignment was not good. So the input shaft would not align with the splines and go in. So we took it apart, and the key to this is as you're putting the pressure plate bolts on and torquing them down, if you can have another person on this alignment tool and pushing it up just a little bit, that helps it align better because gravity is trying to pull all those discs straight down. So with the alignment tool, you push up and now it comes right out like that. Okay, so that's how it's supposed to be, as opposed to how it was where it took a lot of force to get it out of there. So we are hoping that this thing can be stabbed in now. We're gonna give it a whirl, but that was just a quick tip for you guys if you're gonna do this job. Ooh, yes!
Oh my
yes!
God. Okay, let's get, okay, yeah, ratchet just loosened. Should go on. Oh, here we go, it's going.
Ooh, yes! Alright guys, I am back. For you guys, it was a couple seconds. For me, I've been out of the garage for 6 days with COVID, but I'm back. So the point we're at now is we need to get the mount built up for the new transmission. So let's take a peek underneath and then we'll build that mount. Alright, so we have the transmission stabbed in. I put the cross member in, got it all painted up. It looks nice. So here's where I want it to sit roughly. And here are the holes where we need to bolt into the transmissions. So in a quick 20-second time lapse, I'm gonna build something and then I'll show you guys what I have at the end so you can see how to do it. Let's go. So I'm sure some of you are wondering why I didn't have to do any floor modifications to get this transmission to fit. The answer to that is I'm running a 1-inch body lift. I say that over and over again. And that 1-inch body lift has been my saving grace on a ton of little projects like this. So I'm really glad I'm running that. But if you're not running a little body lift, you still can't fit this transmission. Where you're gonna run into issues is the clearance with the driver side hump pan. And so all you have to do is basically mock it in and get a hammer and bang some of this out just a little bit. So it's a tight fit even with the 1-inch body lift, but it fits perfectly. I didn't have to do any modification. So I got the transfer case all cleaned up. Now I just need to replace the output seals. So let's get that done and then we'll be ready to put the transfer case back in after we paint it, of course. Okay, now we have to take these 5 9/16 bolts off. All right, we're gonna put the new seals in. So this is the rear output and this is the front output, and here are the part numbers. So that is for the front output seal and this is for the rear output seal. We're gonna put those in and then we'll put these flanges back on. Okay, we have a bead of RTV on here. So what I'm gonna do is go put it back on and just finger tight the bolts down. And then after an hour, I'll torque them down to their 40 foot-pound torque spec. So the transfer case is all ready to go. It's all painted, all new seals, ready to be put back in. But there's some steps to this process that I want to make sure that I cover so that you're aware what you'll need to do. So a little known fact about the G56, the 2-wheel drive and the 4-wheel drive version are almost identical, except for the seal around the output shaft. That's the only difference that you need to change if you have a 4-wheel drive one. So right now this has the 2-wheel drive seal in it. So I'm gonna pull that out and throw the 4-wheel drive seal in. And then I'll talk to you about the different couplers for whatever transfer case you're using. So let's throw that in and we'll get to that point. So here is the 4-wheel drive output seal, just like that. So let's go pull the 2-wheel drive one and throw this in, and then we'll put our coupler in. There's the old seal. All right, there we go. New seal is in place. All right, now with the seal in place, we need to put our coupler on that couples the output shaft of the transmission to the input shaft of the transfer case. So this is the coupler for the automatic transmission. So this is what came out of it. So this is a 23 spline coupler to a 23 spline coupler. Now, I really like my transfer case. It's in really good condition. And it's almost impossible to find a 29 spline manual transmission transfer case. So what I did is I went to Torque King and I ordered, so this is a coupler that has 29 splines on one side, so this will go on the G56, and 23 splines on the other side. So this will go into my transfer case, the NP205. So this is not ideal. Ideally, you'd use a 29 spline transfer case for this because they're built to handle more torque, but I couldn't find one. They're almost impossible to find. So we're gonna run this coupler for now. If I find one down the road, we can swap it out, but for now this will work. So let's go throw this coupler in, and then we'll be ready to put the transfer case back up in there. So this new gasket for the transfer case to mate to the transmission, basically all you do is put RTV on both sides of it. So we'll put RTV on one side, put it on the transfer case. Once it's on the transfer case, we'll put the RTV on the other side, and then we'll jack it up in there. Alright guys, I got the transfer case in there. That was a pain in the butt to do by myself. I'm still getting over the COVID, so I could barely breathe under there, but I finally got it. Let me show you what it looks like. Whew! That was the hardest thing yet on the project. Alright, so there it is. All bolted up to the transmission. NP205 bolts up right to the G56. No adapter required. So that is going to do it for this part of the project. We got a ton done. We got the hole cut in the floor for the shift tower. We got the adapter plate and the starter put on. We've got the clutch and the flywheel all put on. We got the transmission stabbed in. We got the transfer case put on. We resealed the transfer case. We cleaned the transfer case. So we made a ton of progress. Next video should be the last video before we drive it. So next video, we got a bunch of odds and ends. We're going to talk about the drive shafts. We're going to talk about the wiring harness. We're going to adjust the shifter to the right angle that we want it at. We're going to do the hydraulics, all that stuff. We got to do the pedals still, so a lot of just miscellaneous stuff, but very important stuff for the project. So I hope you guys are enjoying this series. I can't wait to drive it. I'm so ready to have this thing on the road. Thank you for all your support, and we'll see you guys in the next video.